The confession booth felt smaller than usual that Sunday afternoon. My hands were trembling as I made the sign of the cross, and for the first time in my 57 years, I wasn't sure God wanted to hear what I had to say. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," I began, my voice barely a whisper. "It's been 2 weeks since my last confession, and Father, I need to tell you something terrible. I'm not going to help the deaf with sign language anymore. I know that sounds cruel, but Father, you need to understand why. You need to know what happened." Father Martinez shifted on the other side of the screen. I'd been coming to him for confessions for 20 years, and he knew my voice well. He knew I'd been teaching sign language at St. Catherine's Church for the deaf community for the past decade. He knew it was my life's work, my calling, what everyone said was my gift from God. "Tell me everything, my child," he said gently. "Start from the beginning." I took a deep breath, remembering that moment 3 days ago that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Father, I've been living a lie. For 10 years I've been teaching sign language to the deaf community, translating sermons, helping at the deaf school, organizing events. Everyone calls me a saint. They say I'm doing God's work. But 3 days ago I discovered something that changed everything. Have you ever had your entire world flip upside down in a single moment? Have you ever discovered that everything you believed about yourself was built on a foundation of lies? My daughter Emma is deaf," I continued. "She has been since birth. She's 32 now, successful, married, 2 beautiful children. Learning sign language to communicate with her was the most natural thing in the world. It opened up an entire universe for us, and then for others. But Father, what I discovered 3 days ago..." My voice broke. Father Martinez waited patiently. "I was cleaning out my mother's house. She passed away last month. You performed the service. While going through her things, I found a box hidden in the attic. Inside were medical records, doctor's notes, and a confession letter she never sent. Father, my daughter Emma isn't deaf because of genetics or birth complications. She's deaf because of what my mother did." The silence in the confessional was deafening, ironic given the subject matter. "When Emma was 6 months old, I had to go back to work. I was a single mother. Emma's father had left when he found out about the pregnancy. My mother offered to watch Emma during the days. I was so grateful, Father. My mother was a retired nurse, the most competent person I knew. I trusted her completely. I pulled out the letter, though Father Martinez couldn't see it through the screen. But I needed to hold it, to remind myself this was real. In her letter, my mother confessed that she deliberately damaged Emma's hearing. She put drops of a certain medication in Emma's ears over the course of several weeks. Small doses, enough to cause permanent damage, but not enough to raise suspicion. She did it because she said Emma cried too much. The crying gave her migraines, triggered her anxiety, so she decided to solve the problem by making sure Emma would never hear her own cries, and therefore would cry less. Father Martinez gasped audibly. My mother wrote that it worked. Emma became a quieter baby, more manageable, she said. She justified it by saying Emma would never know what she was missing, that deaf people live full lives, that it was a small sacrifice for peace in the house. Tears were streaming down my face now, 10 years of dedication feeling like a mockery. For 32 years, Father, I believed God gave me a deaf daughter as a test, as a calling. I learned sign language with such devotion, thinking I was embracing His plan. I became an advocate, a teacher, a bridge between the hearing and deaf worlds. I built my entire identity around being the mother who didn't just accept her deaf daughter, but celebrated her, who brought that celebration to others. And now? Father Martinez asked softly. Now, I can't look at my hands without feeling sick. Every sign I make feels like a lie. Every deaf person I help reminds me that my mother, the grandmother Emma adored until her death, was the one who stole her hearing. And I never knew. I never suspected. What kind of mother doesn't know? What kind of daughter doesn't see? The confession booth felt like it was closing in on me. But that's not even the worst part, Father. The worst part is what I did after I found out. What would you have done if you discovered that someone you loved and trusted had deliberately hurt your child, even if that person was already dead? What would you have done with that knowledge? I went to Emma's house that night. She was teaching her 5-year-old daughter Lily sign language. Lily isn't deaf, but Emma wants her to be bilingual, English and ASL. Watching them together, their hands dancing in conversation, their faces so expressive and full of joy, I almost told her, I almost destroyed her entire world with the truth. But you didn't. No, I stopped myself. But Father, the reason I stopped myself is why I'm here confessing. I didn't stay quiet to protect Emma. I stayed quiet to protect myself. Because if Emma knew the truth, she'd know that every adaptation she'd had to make, every struggle she'd faced, every moment of isolation in a hearing world was because I failed to protect her, because I trusted the wrong person with her care. Father Martinez was quiet for a long moment. That's a heavy burden to carry. It gets worse, Father. Yesterday, Emma asked me to give the keynote speech at the annual Deaf Awareness Gala. 500 people, all celebrating the beauty of deaf culture, the strength of the deaf community. She wants me to talk about my journey as a hearing mother of a deaf child, how sign language brought us closer together, how it became my calling to serve the deaf community. I laughed bitterly. How can I stand in front of those people, Father? How can I talk about the beauty of sign language when every sign is a reminder of my mother's cruelty? How can I celebrate deaf culture when my daughter's deafness was inflicted, not gifted? How can I continue teaching, translating, helping, when it all feels like a monument to my failure? So you've decided to stop? I've cancelled all my classes. I've told them I'm taking a break for health reasons. I've recommended other teachers. But Father, people are confused, hurt. I've been their pillar for 10 years. Some of the elderly deaf parishioners rely on me exclusively. There's a young deaf boy, Marcus, who just started coming to church because I was there to translate. He'll stop coming now. Father Martinez cleared his throat. My child, may I share something with you? Please, Father. What if I told you that I already knew about your mother? My heart stopped. What? Your mother came to confession a week before she died. She told me everything. She was seeking absolution for what she'd done to Emma. I couldn't breathe. You knew, and you didn't tell me. The seal of confession is sacred, my child. But now that you know, I can tell you what I told her. I gripped the wooden ledge in front of me, my knuckles white. I told her that her sin wasn't just what she did to Emma. It was that she let her guilt die with her instead of transforming it into purpose. I told her to tell you, to let the truth become something powerful rather than let it remain a hidden poison. She was too afraid, but I also told her something else. What? That God works through our brokenness, that sometimes our greatest sins become the doorway to our greatest service. Your mother damaged Emma's hearing, yes. But look what grew from that damage. You didn't just learn sign language, you became a lighthouse for the deaf community. You didn't just adapt to Emma's deafness, you transformed it into a mission that has touched hundreds of lives. But it's all built on a lie, Father. No, my child. It's built on a response to evil with good. You didn't know the evil's origin, but your response was pure. And now that you do know, you have a choice. You can let your mother's sin destroy all the good that came from it, or you can transform even this knowledge into something powerful. Have you ever had someone reframe your entire perspective with a single conversation? Have you ever seen your tragedy suddenly become your possibility? Father Martinez continued. There's something else I need to tell you. Something your mother didn't know when she confessed. I waited, holding my breath. Marcus, the young deaf boy you mentioned, he's your mother's great-nephew, her estranged brother's grandson. Your mother never knew he existed, never knew there was another deaf child in the family. But God knew, and God brought him to your church, to your sign language, to your love. I gasped. Marcus's family. Distant family, but yes. His parents don't know about the connection. They moved here from Puerto Rico, found your church by accident, or what they thought was accident. But think about it. Your mother's sin created a gift in you that is now serving another child in her family, a child who actually needs what you offer. The confession booth no longer felt small. It felt infinite, like the space where all of God's mysteries interconnect. But Father, how can I continue knowing what I know? How can I move my hands in sign language without thinking of my mother's hands putting drops in Emma's ears? Father Martinez was quiet for a moment, then spoke with unusual intensity. Let me tell you something, my child. My brother was deaf, not from birth, but from scarlet fever when he was 7. I was 5. My parents were too poor for special schools, too overwhelmed with 8 children to learn sign language. So my brother lived in our house, but in his own silent world, isolated, angry, eventually running away at 16. I'd never heard Father Martinez share anything personal before. I became a priest, partly because of him, because I failed him. I could have learned sign language. I was young, my brain was flexible, but I didn't. I chose the easier path of verbal communication with everyone else. He died alone on the streets when he was 23. I didn't even know until 2 years after it happened. The weight of his confession mingled with mine in the sacred space between us. When you started teaching sign language here, when I saw you bridging the world my brother couldn't cross, do you know what I felt? I felt God's grace working through you to heal my old wound. Every deaf person you've helped, I see my brother. Every sign you teach, I see the communication I denied him. Your work hasn't just been about Emma or the deaf community. It's been about redemption for all of us who failed someone who couldn't hear. But knowing what my mother did makes your work more important, not less. You're not just teaching sign language anymore. You're undoing a sin. You're taking what was meant for evil and transforming it into good. That's not hypocrisy. That's resurrection. I sat in silence, processing his words. Then a thought struck me. Father, should I tell Emma? Should she know the truth about her deafness? What would the truth give her? Anger, betrayal, the knowledge that her grandmother, whom she loved, was her first abuser. And what would your silence give her? I thought carefully. The preservation of her good memories. The ability to continue seeing her deafness as part of her identity, rather than an inflicted wound. Peace. Then you have your answer. But there's another confession you need to make. Another one? Not to me. To the deaf community. Not about your mother, but about your feelings right now. They deserve to know why you're pulling away. Not the whole truth, but your truth. That you're struggling with feeling worthy to serve them. They'll tell me I'm being ridiculous. Exactly. And they'll be right, because they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to be present. They don't need you to have pure origins for your knowledge. They need you to use that knowledge to help them navigate a hearing world. That evening, after confession, I went to Emma's house. She was worried about me, had heard I'd cancelled my classes. Mom, what's wrong? People are asking about you. Marcus's mother called, crying. She said Marcus won't come to church without you there. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, strong, deaf daughter. She'd become a successful architect, designing buildings with acoustics she'd never hear but understood mathematically. She'd married a wonderful man, also deaf, and they'd created a home where silence was filled with visual poetry. I've been feeling unworthy, I signed to her, like I'm an imposter in the deaf community. Like my sign language is inadequate. Emma laughed, her face lighting up. Mom, do you know what you just signed? You signed unworthy with such perfect emotional expression that I felt it in my chest. You signed imposter with the subtle facial markers that convey internal conflict. Your sign language isn't just adequate. It's poetry, she continued. You think we need perfect teachers. We need committed ones. You think we need people with pure motivations? We need people who show up. You've shown up for 10 years, Mom. Don't stop now. But what if I'm doing it for the wrong reasons? What wrong reasons? Guilt? Love? Obligation, purpose. Mum, I don't care why you started learning sign language. I care that you did. I care that you've given hundreds of people a voice in hearing spaces. I care that you've shown other hearing parents that having a deaf child isn't a tragedy, but an opportunity to learn a beautiful language. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Father Martinez's brother, alone in his silent world. About Marcus, who might stop coming to church. About my mother, carrying her secret to nearly the grave. About Emma, living fully in a world my mother tried to diminish. At 3 a.m., I got up and stood in front of my mirror. Slowly, I began to sign. Not words, just movement. Letting my hands express what my voice couldn't. 32 years of love for Emma. 10 years of service to the deaf community. Grief for what my mother did. Anger at my ignorance. Hope for transformation. My hands moved like a dance, like a prayer. Like a confession without words. That's when I understood what Father Martinez had told me, but I hadn't fully grasped. Sign language wasn't just communication. It was redemption. Every sign I taught undid a moment of my mother's cruelty. Every deaf person I helped contradicted her belief. That deafness was a problem to be solved. Every bridge I built between the deaf and hearing worlds repaired something she had broken. The next morning, I called the church and reinstated all my classes. Then I did something else. I went to the cemetery where my mother was buried. I stood at her grave and signed to her. I signed forgiveness. I signed transformation. I signed that her sin had become my purpose, that Emma's stolen hearing had become a gift to hundreds. I'm not going to help the deaf with sign language to spite you, I signed to the gravestone. I'm going to help them to redeem you, to redeem us both. A wind blew through the cemetery, rustling the leaves in a sound I could hear, but Emma never would. But Emma could feel the wind, see the leaves dance, experience the world in ways my mother never imagined when she thought she was simply solving a noise problem. When I arrived at church for my first reinstated class, Marcus was there. His mother had tears in her eyes. He refused to come when you weren't here, she said. He said, you're the only teacher who signs with your heart, not just your hands. I knelt down to Marcus's level and signed, I'm sorry I left. I was scared. Scared of what? He signed back. Scared that I wasn't good enough for you, Marcus. 7 years old and wise beyond his years. Signed, you're perfect because you try. The class that day was the best I'd ever taught. We worked on emotional expression in sign language. How to convey not just words, but feelings. I taught them how to sign forgiveness with the weight it deserved. How to sign redemption with hope embedded in the movement. How to sign purpose with intention radiating from their fingertips. After class, an elderly deaf woman named Rose approached me. She'd been coming to my classes for 8 years. Something's different about you today, she signed. Different how? Your signs have more truth in them. Before you signed from knowledge. Today you signed from understanding. That evening I went back to Father Martinez. Father, I have another confession. Yes, my child. I went back to teaching, but not for the reasons I started. I started because I loved Emma and wanted to communicate with her. I continued because I found purpose in it. But now I teach as an act of transformation. Every sign is a prayer for my mother's soul. Every deaf person I help is proof that what she meant for harm can be used for good. I'm not going to help the deaf with sign language as charity or calling anymore. I'm going to help them as resurrection. But Father Martinez told me something else, I said, though I was still speaking to Father Martinez. I was confusing myself with the layers of story, but he understood. What did I tell you? He asked, playing along with my narrative confusion. You told me that my mother's confession wasn't the only one you'd heard about Emma. Father Martinez was quiet. Then what do you mean? I mean, what if my mother wasn't the only one who knew? What if Emma's father, who left when I was pregnant, left because he knew what my mother was capable of? What if he tried to warn me, but I didn't listen? What if there are layers to this story I haven't uncovered yet? Would knowing change anything? I thought about it. No, Emma is who she is. The deaf community is what it is. My purpose is what it's become. The origin story matters less than the current chapter. Then let the past stay buried with your mother. Focus on the future you're building. But I couldn't let it go entirely. I hired a private investigator to find Emma's father. Not to confront him, just to know. It took 3 months, but they found him. He was living in Seattle, remarried, 3 other children. I flew out without telling anyone. I didn't contact him, just observed. I watched him with his hearing children at a park. He was teaching them sign language. My heart stopped. Why would he teach hearing children sign language? I approached carefully, pretending to be a stranger interested in his signing. That's wonderful that you're teaching them sign, I said. He looked at me, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. Catherine? Hello, David. We stood there 33 years, collapsed into a moment. You know, he said, it wasn't a question about my mother. Yes, I tried to warn you. I saw her putting something in Emma's ears when Emma was 3 months old. I confronted her. She said it was eardrops for an infection. But I knew she was lying. I tried to tell you, but you trusted her completely. You thought I was being paranoid, jealous of your relationship with your mother, so you left? I left because I knew if I stayed, I'd hurt your mother. And you'd never forgive me for that. I thought if I left, you'd get Emma away from her. I didn't know you'd need to work, need her to babysit more. The weight of everyone's choices settled on my shoulders. Is that why you teach your kids sign language? I teach them in honor of Emma, the daughter I failed to protect. I've followed her career, her life. She's amazing, Catherine. Despite what was done to her, she's amazing. Because of what was done to her, I corrected. She became amazing because she had to navigate the world differently, because she found strength in community, because she learned that communication is more than sound. David's eyes filled with tears. I've wanted to contact her so many times. Don't, I said firmly. She doesn't need the confusion. She doesn't need to know about any of this. She's happy. Let her stay happy. You're protecting her now the way I couldn't then. We're all protecting her. Even my mother, in her twisted way, thought she was protecting herself and me from a crying baby. Protection isn't always pure. But Emma doesn't need protection anymore. She needs support, and she has that. I flew home that night with another piece of the puzzle. But instead of making the picture clearer, it made it more complex. Everyone in Emma's early life had failed her in different ways. My mother through cruelty, David through absence, me through blindness. But Emma had succeeded despite us all. The next Sunday, I was translating the sermon for the deaf congregation. The priest was talking about how God uses our wounds to heal others. As I signed his words, I felt them in my bones. Our wounds become windows, I signed as he spoke. Through them, light enters not just for us, but for others, walking in darkness. After the service, Marcus came up to me. Miss Catherine, why did you become sad last week? Children see everything, don't they? Even deaf children, especially deaf children who read faces and body language like hearing people read sounds. Someone I loved did something bad. I signed carefully. And I just found out about it. Did they say sorry? No, they died before they could. Marcus thought about this. Then he signed something that took my breath away. Maybe you're their sorry, out of the mouths of babes, even signing babes. That afternoon, I visited Emma and told her I wanted to establish a scholarship fund for deaf children to learn sign language and for hearing families to learn it too. I wanted to call it the Emma Foundation. Mom, that's too much. Use your money for yourself. This is for myself, I signed. This is how I heal. Heal from what? I couldn't tell her the truth, but I could tell her a truth. Heal from the guilt of not being able to protect you from every hard thing. No parent can protect their child from everything. But we can transform our guilt into gifts for others. Emma hugged me. Mom, my deafness isn't something you failed to protect me from. It's who I am. It's brought me community, culture, identity, and even my husband. Would you really change it if you could? Would I? If I could go back, stop my mother, save Emma's hearing, would I? No, I signed and meant it. I wouldn't change you. You're perfect as you are. Then stop carrying guilt about it. If only she knew what I was really carrying. But Marcus was right. Maybe I was my mother's sorry. Maybe my work was her penance. Maybe Emma's success was evidence that even the worst sins can be transformed into blessings. That night I had a dream. My mother was there young before she had me. She was signing, fluently, beautifully signing. I woke up with a start and called my aunt, my mother's sister, Aunt Marie. Did Mum know sign language? There was a long pause. Why are you asking? Please just tell me. Yes, we had a deaf neighbor growing up. Your mother was fascinated by the language. She learned it to communicate with the neighbor's daughter. She was quite good at it. The final piece clicked into place. My mother knew sign language. She knew the beauty of it, the community of it. And still she chose to make Emma deaf. Or maybe because of it she chose to make Emma deaf. Knowing I would learn sign language, knowing it would bond us, knowing it would give Emma access to a community my mother had glimpsed and valued. It was twisted logic. But I was beginning to understand my mother's twisted mind. I went back to Father Martinez one more time. Father, I think my mother made Emma deaf not out of cruelty, but out of a twisted form of love. She knew sign language. She knew the deaf community. She thought she was giving Emma a gift. Does that change anything? It changes everything and nothing. The act was still wrong, the violation still real, but the intentions don't erase actions, but they can inform our response to them. Then my response remains the same. To teach, to bridge, to transform, but now with less anger and more understanding. That sounds like forgiveness. It sounds like the beginning of forgiveness. 6 months later, at the Deaf Awareness Gala, I stood before 500 people to give my keynote. Emma was in the front row, beaming with pride. Marcus was there with his family. Rose and the elderly deaf parishioners filled a whole table. I want to tell you about a journey, I began, signing and speaking simultaneously. Not just my journey as a hearing mother of a deaf daughter, but a journey of understanding that communication is more than words or signs. It's about connection, perseverance, and transformation. I told them about learning sign language when Emma was diagnosed as deaf, about the frustration, the breakthrough moments, the joy of finally being able to communicate fully with my child. I told them about discovering the deaf community and realizing it wasn't a disability group but a cultural group. But then I went deeper. Sometimes we come to serve a community for one reason but stay for another. Sometimes we think we're helping, when really we're being helped. The deaf community taught me that silence isn't empty, it's full of possibility. That communication isn't about sound, it's about connection. That what seems like a limitation can become a liberation. I looked at Emma, my beautiful daughter who'd grown into a successful woman, not despite her deafness, but with it as an integral part of her identity. I've been teaching sign language for 10 years. But recently I discovered that my reasons for teaching were more complex than I knew. There was pain I was unknowingly addressing, wrongs I was unknowingly righting, healing I was unknowingly seeking. The audience was captivated. Some were wiping tears. I almost quit last month. I felt unworthy to serve this community. I felt like an imposter, like my motivations weren't pure enough. But then, a 7-year-old boy named Marcus told me something profound. He said, "You're perfect because you try." Marcus beamed and waved from his seat. The deaf community doesn't need perfect allies. It needs committed ones. It doesn't need people with pure motivations. It needs people who show up. And showing up means continuing even when you discover hard truths about yourself or your family. It means transforming pain into purpose, guilt into gifts, silence into song. I paused, letting my words sink in. I'm not going to help the deaf with sign language because it's easy or comfortable or even because I'm naturally good at it. I'm going to help because every sign is an act of rebellion against the idea that communication must be auditory. Every class I teach is a bridge across the divide between hearing and deaf worlds. Every translation I provide is proof that inclusion is possible. The applause was thunderous and beautifully visual, hundreds of hands waving in the air, the deaf way of clapping. After my speech, a young woman approached me. She was hearing but signing fluently. My grandmother made my mother deaf. She signed to me privately, deliberately, when she was a baby. My mother never knew. I found out last year. I've been struggling with the same feelings you described. How can I be part of the deaf community when my family calls deafness? I looked at her, this young woman carrying a similar burden to mine. You be part of it by choosing to be, by transforming the harm into help, by being the reconciliation your grandmother never offered. Is that enough? It's everything. She hugged me, crying. I held her, understanding that our stories weren't unique. How many of us were carrying secrets about how deafness entered our families? How many were transforming guilt into service? Later that night, Emma and I sat in her backyard, watching her children play. Her daughter Lily was teaching her younger brother Sam sign language, making a game of it. Mom. Emma signed, I know there's something you're not telling me. My heart stopped. About why you almost quit teaching. About why you've been different lately. And I want you to know I don't need to know. Whatever it is, whatever you're carrying, I see what you're doing with it. You're turning it into something beautiful. That's enough for me. How did you become so wise? I had a good teacher, she signed with a smile. This woman who learned sign language just to talk to me, who became a bridge to help others like me, who showed me that love isn't about fixing someone, but about meeting them where they are. That night, I went home and wrote a letter to my mother's grave. Not to send, just to write. Dear Mom, I know what you did. I know why you did it. I don't forgive you. Forgiveness isn't mine to give. That belongs to Emma, and she'll never know to give it. But I understand you. You were broken in ways I'm only beginning to comprehend. You thought you were solving a problem, maybe even giving a gift. You were wrong, terribly wrong, but from your wrong I've built something right. Emma is extraordinary. The deaf community is thriving. Hundreds of people have found connection through the sign language I teach. Your sin has become my purpose. Emma's wound has become the world's window. I'm not going to help the deaf with sign language to spite you or honor you or forgive you. I'm going to help them because it's who I've become. A bridge between worlds. A translator of more than words. A transformer of pain into purpose. Rest in whatever peace you can find. Your granddaughter is happy. Your great-great-nephew Marcus is learning. Your daughter is teaching. The cycle of harm stopped with you. The cycle of healing started with me, and that has to be enough. Your daughter, Catherine, I burned the letter in my fireplace. Watching the smoke rise like prayers or confessions or maybe both, the next day I got a call from a hospital. They had a newly diagnosed deaf baby whose parents were devastated. Would I come talk to them? I went immediately. The parents were young, maybe 25. The mother was crying. The father was angry. They say she'll never hear music, the mother sobbed. Never hear us say we love her. I sat down beside them, remembering my own devastation 32 years ago. She'll see you say you love her. I signed and spoke. She'll feel it in your touch, see it in your faces. And music? She'll feel the vibrations, see the rhythms. She'll experience music differently, not less. How do you know? The father asked, skeptical. Because my daughter is deaf. Has been since she was a baby. She's 32 now, an architect, married 2 kids. She designs concert halls with perfect acoustics she'll never hear, but understands, mathematically. She dances by feeling the bass through the floor. She's lived a life so full that I sometimes forget she experiences the world differently than I do. But how will we communicate with her? You'll learn sign language. It's not as hard as you think. Babies can sign before they can speak. Your daughter will be able to tell you she's hungry, tired, happy, sad, months before a hearing baby could vocalize those needs. You'll have conversations with your hands that are just as rich as any spoken word. The mother looked at me with hope creeping into her eyes. Will you teach us? I'll do better than that. I'll introduce you to the deaf community, to deaf adults who are doctors, lawyers, teachers, artists, to families like yours navigating this journey, to a world you didn't know existed but will become your second home. As I left that hospital room, I thought about Father Martinez's words, about how confessions can become transformations, about how the worst things that happen to us can become the best things we do for others. 3 years have passed since I discovered my mother's letter. The Emma Foundation has provided sign language education to over 500 families. We've trained 50 new sign language interpreters. We're bridging communication gaps in hospitals, schools, and churches across 3 states. Marcus, my mother's great-nephew, is now 10. He's become a youth ambassador for the deaf community, teaching hearing kids at his school basic sign language. He doesn't know we're related, but sometimes I see my mother's eyes in his, except where hers held secrets and shame, his hold openness and pride. Last month, something extraordinary happened. I was teaching a sign language class when an elderly woman wheeled herself in. She was probably 80, frail but with sharp eyes. "Are you Catherine?" she asked. "Yes, I'm Patricia. I was your mother's friend. Her only friend, really, near the end. My blood ran cold. I know what she did," Patricia said simply. "She told me everything before she died. About Emma, about the drops, about her reasons. I've been carrying this knowledge for over a year, trying to decide what to do with it." I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. "Why are you here?" "Because I need to tell you something your mother couldn't. Something she asked me to tell you if you ever found out." Patricia pulled out an envelope. Worn from being handled many times, she wrote this the day before she died. She knew she was going, felt it coming. "She made me promise to give it to you only if you discovered the truth on your own." With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. My mother's handwriting, shakier than I remembered, filled the page. "My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, you've found my confession. You know what I did to Emma. You must hate me. I understand. I hate myself, but I need you to know something I couldn't put in that other letter. I'm deaf too, not fully, but significantly. Have been since I was 40. Progressive hearing loss, they said. Genetic. I hid it from everyone, even you. Hearing aids hidden by my hair, lip reading that everyone mistook for attentiveness. I was so good at hiding it that no one knew. When Emma was born, I had her tested. She carried the gene. She would have lost her hearing anyway, probably by age 10 or 15. What I did was accelerate the inevitable.